Hey there, hello and welcome. It is Madeline here, and I just got off the phone with a client. And so today I want to talk about boundaries because my client was having, we'll call him Larry, was having boundaries issues, right? So he's already been through his breakthrough session, and now we are in the hard part of the work, which is enforcing boundaries, okay? That's part of enforcing boundaries is part 4, is pillar number 4 of the 7 pillars of primordial power, which is take intelligent action, right? And taking intelligent action is number 4 in the 7 pillars of primordial power. So if you're here live with me, say hey so I can see who it is. Otherwise I can't see who it is. And before we go much further, I want to say, we are a week into the new year. It is January 7th, and I'm closing enrollment on my enrollment in the Primordial Power program on Friday at 5 o'clock, Friday the 10th at 5 o'clock. So if you haven't booked your clarity call yet to see if we can figure out what's going on with you and how I can help you, you have to do that by Friday. Okay, do it by Friday at 5 o'clock. Don't wait until then. You want to do it right away. I have some spots open in the next couple of days, and I'll put the link in the comments as always, madelinecorrea.com/apply, and grab your spot. Now, but tonight we're talking about boundaries, right? So I've just gotten off the phone with one of my current clients, and I have some amazing stories about some past clients as well. Larry, right? So Larry had some drama over the weekend with a cousin of his, a family member, anyway, who he had some trouble with in the past, right? So the situation, I'm not going to give you all the details about the situation, but, Larry's family member had asked to borrow money, and lies were told about the repayment of the money, and he was looking for some more money. So not a good situation, as you can imagine, okay? And not a new situation for my client, right? For Larry. But essentially, right, so we talked about, and, Larry wanted to give me all the details, but, the details don't really matter. What really mattered, I like to cut to the chase when I'm working with my clients, and I get to the heart of the matter, which is, what are your boundaries in this area, right? So, and what are boundaries in general, right? So, and we spend, there's a whole lesson in one of the Primordial Power modules on boundaries, because it's a big part of the work we do, and it's a big part of your being able to live an extraordinary life. So boundaries, I like to call them our rules of engagement, okay? They're what's important to us and how we want people to treat us, how we want people to behave around us, okay? So sometimes before I actually start working with my clients, people think that, how people treat them is about them, right? Because they've got baggage, right? So Larry, for example, had suffered trauma as a child. And I'm also going to tell you about Diane, who also suffered trauma as a child. People had treated her badly, her and him badly as children. And before we let go of your emotional baggage, one of the questions I hear on a regular basis is, how could they do that to me? Why would somebody treat me that way? And a couple of things, when you're, when you're a young child, you really are a victim. But as adults, right? As adults, people treat us the way that we allow them to treat us. People treat us the way one of my mastermind sisters said, people treat us the way that we train them to treat us. And that's circling back to, people treat us the way we allow them to treat us. So my clients, Diane and Larry, had been mistreated as children. So as a result, they grew up into adults who allowed people to mistreat them. So I'll get back to that, right? So Diane in particular, Diane used to ask a lot, why? So Diane's issue was Diane's emotional turmoil and baggage showed up in her personal relationships, right? She would keep attracting these terrible men who treated her badly. And she used to get hung up on the how can somebody do this to me? And this is one thing I really want you to take away from this live today, is that how people treat you is not about you, it's about them. Okay, right? You never deserve to be treated badly, right? And so especially as children, right? So Diane and Larry were mistreated as children, right? That's not about them. That's about the adults who mistreated them. And that was their stuff, right? That was the adults' stuff. And Diane and Larry were truly victims, okay? And asking yourself why that's never a good question, right? Unless the only time it's a good question, the only time you should ask yourself why is this important to me? Otherwise, why is someone else behaving the way that they're behaving is never a good question, right? That only fuels a fire that cannot be put out. Like, you don't have the answers to those questions. So back to setting boundaries, right? So again, people are treating you the way, now as adults, right? People are treating you the way that you allow them to treat you. And perhaps, so like Larry and Diane, like before you start doing the work that we do in my Primordial Power program and we let go of your baggage, right? We actually wipe the slate clean. You might be hard pressed to enforce boundaries, okay? Because you're just stuck underneath your emotional baggage, right? Whether that be abuse or trauma, you think they actually thought that they deserved to be treated that way. But after we did the release work and did their breakthrough session and wiped the slate clean, then they can see clearly it's really like a new day, and that they can recognize that, no, I don't deserve to be treated this way. That wasn't about me, right? That bad behavior. And even as adults, right? That bad behavior for Diane, all the men that, all the not nice men that she had, awful men actually, that she had attracted were not, like she didn't deserve those. She didn't deserve to be treated that way. That was about her, but she was actually attracting them because her energy was all off. But back to boundaries, okay? So once we cleared, right? And so Larry has this current situation where he's got this family member who is borrowing money and not paying it back, and then lying about the circumstances of the arrangement, right? So now we're working through, what are your boundaries, right? How do you want to handle this situation? Because now we've cleared Larry's baggage, right? For Larry, it was depression, right? So we've cleared that away. Now he can see clearly. He's stepping into his self-confidence, and he's determining what's important to me, right? What are my values, and how am I going to establish boundaries in this particular situation with this family member? But this is true for any situation, isn't it? That's right. So again, boundaries are our rules of engagement, okay? And it's what we decide that we are going to allow or tolerate in our lives, okay? So first of all, when you have emotional baggage, right, whether that be anxiety, depression, or emotional turmoil from trauma, let's say, right? And emotional turmoil usually results in anxiety and or depression, but it doesn't have to, right? So it's hard to see what those boundaries are. It's hard to put up those rules, but we decide this is how I'm going to be treated, And these are the rules for engaging with me. So the mistake that I see a lot of people make is that they expect other people to know what their boundaries are. Okay, so that's rule number one. People don't know what your boundaries are, right? Don't assume that people know what your boundaries are. You have to communicate them to them. Okay, so, and this could be as simple as, you know, I had one client whose you know, college-aged children used to disrupt dinner time somehow, right? So, and she would complain about, you know, like, how about I can't have dinner at a certain time, or I can't have, you know, like, it's hard to have the food that I want because, you know, my children aren't in agreement with the situation. But when we work through her boundaries, right, assume that people want to honor your boundaries, okay? That's the first assumption, because our energy impacts the energy of the people around us, right? So assume, you can assume that, I would encourage you to assume that people want to honor your boundaries, right? But don't assume that they know what they are, right? So have a conversation with them about, these are my boundaries, okay? So for my client, my former client with the college children, like, you know, she had a conversation with her family about dinner time, what her nutrition and fitness goals were, and she would like their encouragement and support and meeting them. And she was able to get agreement on what was going to happen around dinner time. Not too complicated. But, you know, when you assume that they should know what I want, or they're not honoring, you know, they're not trying to be helpful. No. Don't assume that people can't read your mind, my loves, okay? Don't assume that they know. You have to communicate what your boundaries are, okay? And then when people cross your boundaries, you also have to communicate to them what the ramifications are going to be for crossing the boundaries, all right? So, and, you know, I teach, you know, 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out, right? So if you cross my boundaries once, this is going to happen. If you cross my boundaries twice, that is, you know, X is going to happen. And a third time is, you know, might be like, we're done, right? So it depends on what, you know, it depends on what the situation is. And then there are threshold boundaries where it's like one and done, right? So like the example I like to use for a threshold boundary is like, you know, lying or cheating in an intimate partnership, right? In an intimate relationship, right? I don't tolerate cheating, and, you know, cheating once and you're done, we're through, okay? That might not be the case for you, right? I know relationships that have recovered for that sort of thing, but that's my threshold boundary. And that's the threshold boundary for a lot of people that I work with, right? So, you know, so I've been sharing some extreme cases with you, right? So I'm sure Larry's going to be able to work out the situation with his cousin and the money and the lying. Work out the situation in a manner that's good for him, okay? But what are your boundaries, right? So I want you to consider, what are your boundaries? And if people are walking all over you, right, it's because you allow it, right? So how can you establish boundaries and then communicate them to people, right? So it could be that you have a boss, right, that's too demanding, right? That would require you having a conversation with your supervisor, your boss, about what you are available for, right, within the scope of your job description. If you are the boss, right, and you probably are the boss, right? So I work with a lot of leaders, right? Perhaps I could be an employee that is not pulling their weight, right? I hear this a lot. And again, so in the workplace, we may call it establishing expectations, right? What do you expect from your employee? Make sure that it's clear, right? Again, don't assume that your employee knows what you want. Set those expectations, make them clear, and then you need to be prepared to enforce them, okay, right? What happens if you don't meet my expectations? What happens if you don't meet my expectations a second time? Okay. And then there is the, the family member, right? So oftentimes it's family members. Again, whatever the situation, a work situation, a family member, a friendship, I want you to assume that people want to honor your boundaries, right? Come from there and have the conversation when you're in a good place, right? When someone is violating your boundaries is not the time to have the boundaries conversation. But when things are good and calm, that is a good time to have the boundaries conversation. Okay. And then if you're finding, right? So if you're finding that you're unable to do this, then there's probably baggage, right? So if you're suffering from anxiety and depression, then that emotional trauma is keeping you from enforcing your boundaries, being clear on what your boundaries are. And this is the work that we do in my Primordial Power program, okay? So we're going to get at, so remember, one of the first pillars of Primordial Power is, right, you step into that I am the creator of my future. And then the second one is that the second pillar is that we uncover the root cause of the problem, right? So if that's anxiety, depression, trauma, we get at the root cause of that, and then we release it, right? We let it go. So then, and when I say release it, we do release work, right? So I have a process, a technique where we can release all that stuff. We can release a lifetime of stuff in a few hours, wipe the slate clean, and then from there, we can determine what's important to you, get clear on your values, and then I help you integrate the changes into your life, which includes enforcing boundaries. Okay, that's the hard part, right? Like getting you feeling better, like lifting the veil from anxiety and depression is actually the easy part. And it's kind of fun for me because I can actually see the shift happen. But then the hard part is, right, is incorporating the changes into your life and like establishing and enforcing boundaries. Okay, so if you need help with this sort of thing, right? So enrollment is open right now for my Primordial Power program. We're going to start on January 23rd, but enrollment is closing on Friday, January 10th. So I invite you to schedule a clarity call with me before then so we can determine if I can help you, right? So on that call, we're going to get clear on what's going on with you and then see if I can help you. And if I can, we'll talk about what that looks like. And if not, that's cool. You're still going to get amazing value from the call by getting clarity on your situation, where you're at, where you need to go from there. And if I can help you with that, even if that means pointing you in another direction, I will gladly do that, okay? So you schedule that call by going to MadelineCorrea.com/apply, and I will look forward to talking with you soon. I hope this serves you. Let me know what questions you have in the chat. And I will look forward to seeing you again soon, and probably tomorrow because there was something else I wanted to talk to you about. But anyway, I'll be talking with you again soon, okay? And until then, I will see you in the gap. Namaste. Be blessed. Mwah.